Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. Thank God it's Friday. We have lots to discuss. The two games in the, one in the West, one in the East. I like the way they balance that out tonight. Um, Vegas leading 1-0 in their best of seven. And I believe Carolina, New Jersey, it's 1-0 Carolina, but I think they're going to. I remember the schedule's a little jumbled because of building availability. I know that Toronto is not playing in Florida until Sunday. That had more to do not with building availability, but with the Miami Heat playing the Knicks in Miami, so they didn't want to conflict with that. So, but we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, so right now going on, it's in the Philly area because it encapsulates Philly and New Jersey are the World Youth Hockey Championships. And it's a lot of birth years from 08, 07, 06. Mm-hmm. So there's some really good players there. I witnessed some this morning at Hollydale, which is literally like 20 minutes from my house. So, and man, they've built up that place. I hadn't been there in like 5 years.
I used to play there all the time. I haven't been there.
No, it's
20
like,
years probably.
like 5 rinks now. You can't just go to one rink and see Guy Gaudreau and practice your skating. Like, you won't be able to do that anymore. It's like a massive place. It's like the place in Aston. But that's the thing. So they're playing there in Aston at the Flyers place, training center in Voorhees. And so like I'll be there Sunday night because there's a big time prospect playing there. I'm not going to tell you who he is because you'll just have to read my article when it comes out. But we'll be doing that. But it's nice that all of this is happening, and some of the Flyers are actually coaches. So like Joel Farabee will be a coach. Tony D'Angelo is going to be a coach. So there's a few of them that are coaching some of these teams. So interesting tournament, a lot of players from around the world, Canada and otherwise. So, exciting that it actually came to little old South Jersey by me.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our buddy Dan used to coach at Hollydale for years.
Okay.
He coached. He was that. Our buddy Dan actually coached Johnny Gaudreau as a little kid. But and at one point that place was run by Don Knockbauer, a former Flyer.
Name sounds. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's why I know the name.
He ran at Hollydale for a long time. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
People should check it out. They're passing around the area. Go watch some good hockey.
Yeah, that's really great. Oh, geez, good job. All right, ready? Here we go. Hi, Mike. Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday, May 5th, 2023.
I'm Michael Agello, and Generalissimo Francisco Franco is still dead.
I'm Russ Cohen, and listen, I predicted what the Panthers would do. I feel comfortable with that.
So did I.
I'm Kevin Allen, and I thought Russ Cohen was going to say that he concurs that Franco is dead.
No, I didn't. No,
that's where I thought you were going with that.
But I get the joke.
Yeah.
You killed my father. No,
Oh, that's Inigo Montoya.
I know. Good. You got the reference just from that. That's pretty impressive. Princess Bride. And I'm Eklund, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday, and damn it, it's Friday, and I just can't believe it because this has been a week from hell, but it's been a long week around here. But that's okay because we're on the podcast now, and I'm really happy to be here. And I am going to start off by talking about last night's game with and Maple Leafs because, and here's why. Like, it's fascinating because I've been rooting for the Maple Leafs.
That's the problem.
No, but I mean over the years because there's so many Leaf fans. You're a good friend. I want this team to be successful, and I think they're talented, and I like Mitch Marner guy. I really I've gotten to know John Tavares a little bit over the. This is a team that I don't know Austin Matthews very well, I have to admit, but I would like to. And last night, I saw the Leafs curse firsthand, Mike, because that was you guys all call it the Eklund curse, but it's not. That was the luckiest I've ever seen a team get in a game. The Panthers last night. I'm not just going to throw it. No. You have to when you do a highlight package. Let me finish a highlight package of posts, pucks going through Bobrovsky's legs and going wide, all kinds of crazy things. I mean, you got to be good to be lucky, but man, oh man, puck luck was on the Panthers' side last night.
I think I'm putting in the odd position of defending the Florida Panthers because that's taking away from the Panthers and what they've been able to do. But let me. Okay.
Yeah, I go.
My issue, and I wrote about it today, is that in five, and I've said this when the Leafs beat Tampa, and it's pertained to the first 2 games of this series. Other than game 2 against Tampa, the Leafs have not put a solid, complete effort, not 60 minutes, because maybe that's unreasonable, but a solid, complete effort in a game to be able to win it comfortably. They've had to come from behind. I mean, I think of the 8 teams that are still alive in the Stanley Cup playoffs, they have led the least in their series. And now in game 1, they fell behind early. They didn't seize on power plays. They came back, and then a bad giveaway allowed Verhaeghe to score the breakaway goal in game 1, and they couldn't beat Bobrovsky. In this game, they followed the same blueprint as game 2 against Tampa. They shot out to a 2-0 lead. They were full marks for that. Florida scores a goal in the first period. Lundell, a great play by Sam Reinhart. They're up 2-1. They should feel good about themselves, and they come out in the second period absolutely friggin' comatose. And they've done this over and over this season. Now, no team is perfect, but when you come out of the locker room up 2-1 and the crowd is going nuts, and you give up a goal 19 seconds into the second period, and now you're tied, and you're so stunned that you give up another one, and then you can't beat Bobrovsky, that's not on luck. That's on attention to detail, and they lost because they can't put together a solid effort against a team that they probably should beat.
Yeah. Kevin?
Well, I agree with some of what Mike said. Because I think Toronto should beat Florida, just the way, things have gone this season. But, I don't think Mike gave enough credit to Florida last night. Toronto probably thinks they didn't come out strong enough in the second, but Florida, they've come up big every time they've needed to do that. They've stepped up their game, and now Bobrovsky, has forgotten. He's forgotten what year it is that he thinks he's back winning Vezina trophies again, and he's playing very well. And it's not like he's spectacular. He's just doing what he needs to do to win, and he's he's been doing that. And the Panthers have been very impressive, and I think you got to call them a momentum team now. Like they're a team that feels really good about themselves. They're very confident. There's no lead they don't think they can come back from. And, you got to have a good leader. You got to have a rallying cry. And they have a guy like Tkachuk who can, wave the flag and say, let's go, boys. Let's go get them. Yeah. And, so I've been impressed by Florida. They're really getting the job done. It's not like, if you think back to when Tampa Bay lost to Columbus, it was a total collapse.
Yes.
And the Maple Leafs are in these games. They just can't get over the hump. They just can't seem to get the one goal they need. If they could have gotten one more goal early on, that would have been a little demoralizing. It's hard to get put your finger on the reason why they, haven't been able to do that. But, if it happens occasionally, I think that's luck. If it happens all the time, as Mike points out, then there has to be some sort of flaw in their preparation or whatever.
It was so. Go ahead, Russ. You first, please.
Okay. I was going to say, I do want to congratulate Kev for coming over to my side about the momentum team, because that's what I thought I saw Florida becoming when they came out of the last series and then into the first game. It does look like they are that team. But 2 things. One thing Eck and I talked about, Samsonov does not make the right save at the right time. He didn't last night. That third goal was bad. And 2, he's given up 3 goals every game. I said that before the series starts. Yeah. He will give up 3 goals every game in the playoffs. That's been his history. That's been him. Now, what's killing the Leafs here, and this is where I can't blame Keefe, is that the whole Matt Murray thing now looms large, because they would love to put Matt Murray in, but he's not available. Now, whether he'll be available in 2 days, who knows? But the whole thing, and this goes back to Kyle Dubas now, when they signed these 2 goalies, and we talked about this in last July, this was a scenario that we could all see coming, and it's happening now. It just took beyond the first round. So now we have to look at that and say, okay, if they go out like lambs in the second round, which I don't know if will happen or not, but if they do, maybe Dubas doesn't get fired, but he's got to have a talking to, because again, they will be no better off next year for goaltending than they were this year.
Well, I mean, and I'll grant you this point, because I watched all 3 of the goals that he gave up yesterday. He had absolutely no chance on the Lundell goal. That was a great play by Reinhart. The Barkov goal was a screenshot that I think you have to make the save, but since he didn't see it, you can't really blame. The Forsling goal, the game winner, I mean, it was a complete collapse defensively. They gave up the puck at the blue line, and it was a Kachuk pass across the way. He had no chance on it, Russ. I don't think he. But my issue here is, and this has been through Freddie Anderson, through ex-best friend Jack Campbell, and now with Ilya Samsonov. The Leafs need goaltending that they usually come up against, like Tuukka Rask, or Braden Holtby against Washington, or Vasilevsky.
Those guys don't cost $1.5 million. That's my whole point here.
But my point is, Russ, is they come up against goaltenders that make saves.
No.
You don't expect. Well, let me finish. They come up against goaltenders.
Let me finish.
They come up against goaltenders that make the save that you don't expect, and they never get the goaltending that makes the save that you don't expect. And that's
because they're taking.
Rush, you have the talking plate. Take this.
No, but all I want to say is, when they spent very little money on goaltending this offseason, they took a guy with a bad injury history, and they took a guy who didn't do well in the playoffs last year and was ousted by a GM who was fed up with him in the playoffs last year and are hoping for better.
Yeah, and the goaltender that they spent the money on won 2 Stanley Cups. So that's the whole.
That's also highly susceptible. I mean, listen, as much as I want to go on the bandwagon here that they should have signed Campbell, which I've always been about.
Oh my God!
I can't blame Samsonov for this. Like, in my opinion, watching this game, I think he's actually played really well in this series. Like, I mean, yes, he has to make that save. Granted, Rush, that was one of the biggest things I talk about all the time.
Yeah,
he has made some big saves at big times. He just hasn't made enough big saves at big times. But two big. Like Kevin said, these are close games. This is so close. Looking at these posts, looking at all the crazy shots they had, times when they were hitting Bobrovsky when he wasn't even looking. Last night they deserved to win that game. I fully believe they deserved to win that game, and they didn't. And that happens in the playoffs for sure. But now to sit there and people are counting them out, I wouldn't count them out at all. Like I remember Florida has lost 2 of 3 at home.
Well, you have to admit, 0-2 is a pretty good time to count somebody out. Like, if you're going to do it.
But when you got the Devils, it's like we counted. The Devils looked far more out of it than the Leafs did. Like, the Devils against the Rangers looked far more done than the Leafs looked to me. Kevin?
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, and we've talked about this in the past, but I think Mike's right, and you guys are all kind of circling around this about, making the right saves at the right time. I mean, you don't bring a goalie in to make saves when you say, like you never should say the goalie doesn't have a chance. Like, I get why everybody says that, because I've been guilty of it as well. Because, the net is wide open, his defenseman betrays him. But goalies make saves in those circumstances. Right. And, as Harry Sinden in my first few years in the league said, I don't pay goalies to make routine saves. I pay him to save the puck when it looks desperate. And, he can do it. And that's what we don't see from the Maple Leafs goaltender. He hasn't been able to do that.
Yeah, the only game that he did that, Kev, was Game 6 against Tampa, where I think he out-goaltended Vasilevsky. But other than that, he's been okay. But you need goaltenders to step up at this time of year. Otherwise, you're not going to win. Or otherwise, and this has been, again, the big problem here. In the first 2 games of the series, the Florida core group, led by Kachuk, and last night Barkov scored, and Anton Lundell and Reinhart, they have outplayed Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and especially William Nylander, who has gone goalless and pointless in 4 games and is -4. I don't care how many shots the guy gets. If he doesn't convert or he doesn't create opportunity.
I'm with you on him. I thought he was really weak.
They were the TNT crew was like, oh my God, he's got 7 shots on goal. It's friggin' meaningless if he doesn't pop them.
It's funny, Mike. I was watching Hockey Night in Canada. Broadcast instead, just because I like to do that sometimes. And they were actually the opposite. They were saying, it doesn't matter how many shots. They basically were saying what you were saying. It doesn't matter how many shots. It's interesting to see like two different perspectives on that. Kev?
I think shots are an indicator, though. I mean, like if a guy wasn't scoring, he wasn't getting any shots, and you're saying, he's not creating everything. But, how many times have we heard, and I know coaches believe strongly in this, if a guy's getting a lot of chances, that's when they start to think that he's just unlucky.
Right.
Because everyone knows everyone's lifetime shooting percentage, and they've got it sort of figured out. And the idea is if Nylander is getting 7 or 8 shots a game, well, then he's getting shots, but he just hasn't any luck, and eventually it will turn around because he has a percentage. So it's those kind of issues are always hard to sort out.
Now, I can tell you this based on listening to the post game last night. If Sheldon Keefe had a real option to switch to for next game, he'll do it.
Right.
But if he doesn't, he's frustrated because it's hard to give up 3 goals every game and win. It is.
Yeah, I mean, they cut off the video on the Leafs website, but Russ was listening to it and basically
listening on Sirius where they don't cut anything.
Yeah, I said that Sheldon Keefe basically walked off the stage. I wasn't able to see proof of that, but
walk up stage, but audio stop.
Thing about this though.
Well, just a little update. Just a little update here. Matthew Nyes, who left the game in the first period after getting hit by Matthew Tkachuk high and then sort of wrestled and slammed to the ground by Sam Bennett. He's out with a concussion. So the body. So I mean, and that was the thing. And this is playoff hockey. This is what you do. You target players. That's what they did. Nyes was one of their best players in game 1. He's a rookie. They targeted him. They got him. They did. I'm telling you right now.
Tkachuk hits whatever moves, and Nyes is in the way. I mean, honestly, they're not going to go. Tkachuk's not the kind of player who's like, I'm going to take on a 19-year-old.
Well, maybe Tkachuk didn't, but Bennett sure as hell did. And
I don't know. I don't see that as a targeting thing. I think he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, to be honest. I mean,
no, I think that's probably the likely scenario. Yes,
but now he's out, and you could see a guy like Wayne Simmons or Zach Aston Reese step back in the lineup. But I mean, the only benefit for Toronto right now going forward is because of the building availability, like we were mentioning earlier. Game 3 is not until Sunday, so maybe that takes a little bit of the momentum away from Florida. But 1 goal or 1 hit, and that's
Kevin, you're shaking your head. To me, the extra day always hurts the team that's down 2-0.
So, well, not necessarily. I mean, it just depends. We'll know in the first period, who it's benefiting. So, I mean, right now, like the Panthers really do have that, feel like
they do.
So it's interesting because, I don't see that in any team out west. I think they're still kind of finding their way. All 4 of those teams.
I agree with you.
Where
Seattle seems to have it sometimes, but
but the Panthers know who they are.
They are.
And if they didn't, Tkachuk told them.
Right.
He walked in that room and he said, "This is who we are now.
Yeah.
This is who I am. This is how I play, and I don't allow anybody not to play the way I play.
Right.
So if you want to play with me, get aboard. Otherwise, go elsewhere."
And you know what, Kev? I admire that swagger because they have.
I do too.
They have an identity and they stick with it. Bennett has been this type of guy since he played with Calgary. He cross-checked bunting across the neck. He got a $5,000 fine. I'm sure he's very glad to pay that fine to be able to impose his will. Guys like Montour is playing very physically. Ekblad is doing the same. They're pressing with physicality on the Leafs, and it's up for if the Leafs are going to get back in this series, they're going to have to either fight through it or respond. I think probably they're better off fighting through it because they're not an overly physical team, and I don't think that if you go into a game trying to out-hit the Panthers, they got you right where they want them.
Here's the thing that they're doing wrong, and that they the Leafs, were at one point the power plays were 8-1 last night. I'm not sure where they ended up. The Leafs had at least 8 power
plays. The problem is, like Mike said, if they go over to Florida now and just try and hammer them and end up on the wrong side of the penalties,
Yeah.
you could be down 3-0. Like I don't think they could play it like that. I think they could be a little more physical, yes, but I think Kachuk now has the edge mentally where he knows he's going to go after certain guys to try and draw penalties. That's it, or at least get them off the ice.
In the first two games, Eck, the Leafs have 8 power plays. Panthers have 2. That's reflective of the way.
That's the whole thing.
That's how they play.
But you see, but you have to, like, how many goals do they have on the power play right now? They have 1, right? It's if you're going to stop the Panthers, you got to do what Boston did to them, which is you got to make your power play deadly, because that changes the way the Panthers have to play. Like if the Panthers start to believe that their power play, that they can kill penalties against Toronto, Toronto is dead.
Their power play was really good in the first period. They scored a goal, but then they only had 1 power play from that point on for the rest of the game, and that was when Bunting got cross-checked. So it really wasn't a special teams game. It was a 5-on-5 game, and at 5-on-5, Florida was better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple issues with this whole Kachuk thing, too. First of all, Kachucks don't change.
Right.
So, so they won't change their style.
Right.
But that's how you beat them, though. You make them pay. You get goals on the way they're going to play.
Yeah.
But I think there's a couple things going on here. I made the point. I remember everyone was surprised when you pointed out how many hits Kachuk had last season, and then how many his brother had. I think there was some discussion about that within the family about what was going on there, because he has been a different player. Now, maybe he sensed Florida needed that too, because, it's almost a cliche.
Yeah.
The new sheriff is in town,
Yeah.
but that is clearly what happened in Florida. Barkov's team looks a lot different than Matthew Kachuk's team, even though there's a lot of the same players on that team. But, and Barkov, I think I give him a lot of credit too, because he's sort of, not that he stepped aside, he's still a very important part of that team, and his leadership's important, and everybody respects him and everything else. But he has given Kachuk license to do what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like he has said, you go, you got a good thing going here. Just keep leading, pick that flag up and run with it. And he's allowed to do that. But I think Kachuk has taken stock of his the way he was playing. And I don't remember, we can look it up, but his hits were down last year. Yeah, and they are not down now.
No,
so,
I mean, you're right, Kev. I mean, at one point, didn't we all think that Brady Kachuk was the better Kachuk? And do we still?
No, I think they're both.
Well, the more physical. He was the more physical.
Yeah, it was the more like. Yes. I mean, I would if before the season, if I was to wager on what, I would have gone Brady slightly. Like I would have just because I thought that he could score, but he also had that presence, that physical presence. But now,
Brady has more offensive finesse. I still do.
Yeah,
he scores a little differently, and that's fine.
Yeah, but what he's done this year, and I mean, so the GM of the year is based on the playoffs as well. Am I right about that?
Yes, that is
right.
correct.
It is right. That's one of the only awards it is. Correct.
Correct.
So
I'm just showing this while.
Okay, let me finish this one thought, and then yes. So Bill Zito, I mean, really, I mean, you guys know that I'm a fan of his, but when you look at what the Huberdeau Uyghur trade for Kachuk, and what happened with Montour bringing in
Gudis,
even bringing in Lyon in the right because he's like a guy that we signed as an emergency guy and turned out to be good. I mean, who you would have thought he would have turned out. He had 2 goalies. He had to deal. He also had to deal with losing who he thought his starter was going to be this year. His starter was going to not be Bobrovsky or Lyons. So. I mean, and then then you go back to Montour's signings and Verhaeghe's signings and Bennett signings. I mean, I think he's got serious shot at GM of the year in my mind. Anybody agree? Or
I think he's in the running.
Yeah,
if it includes the playoffs, for sure. I mean, if it was like every other award that was just the regular season, it would probably go to Don Sweeney because
definitely. But
I think Sweeney still is going to get consideration because of the 65 wins.
Right.
He should. I'm not saying he shouldn't, but the reality is like that culture that we're seeing from the Florida Panthers now is a direct result of the culture that Bill Zito wanted to bring there when he got there. Like this is a totally different kind of Florida Panthers team than we saw before Bill Zito was there. Like and that attitude and everything about it. Like I mean, Huberdeau and Uyghur, they were tough guys to get rid of. We all thought that, right?
Right, but you were going to lose both of them after next year anyway. So that's the reason why they made the move.
Well, they did have to lose them both. I mean, the Huberdeau would have signed there forever if they wanted him to. But
I think it's the point, Act, that they probably didn't want to spend the resources that they would have had to re-sign Huberdeau.
They spent it on Kachuk.
Yeah, I was going to say, there wasn't the money. They were willing to spend the money. It was
money. It was I know Kachuk and not Huberdeau. You know, that's how they said
I know they were willing to spend money, but they didn't want to spend money on a player like Huberdeau, who is sort of a peripheral player. I mean,
he was a 100-point scorer. Remember that? Like, he was a 100-point scorer when they traded him.
But he's not as multi-dimensional as
no, he's not. But you know, and Uyghur, everybody said, "Wow, that's a great." And I too thought, man, you know, if you were to sit here and tell me that, you know, Montour would have, like 2 years ago, Montour would be more important than Uyghur on this team, I never would have a million years thought that.
But last year, Uyghur in the playoffs, everybody was on him. He did not have a good playoff last year. So, you know, you got to remember the timing of that. So it actually made some sense.
For sure. It was but I just think that, you know, this culture we're seeing now, granted, they're getting lucky too. I mean, there's no question they're getting lucky. Go ahead, Mike.
The reaction of Kyle Dubas they showed on Sportsnet of him sort of losing his mind and throwing the water bottle. You know, I mean, if you don't think that there's still pressure on him, I mean, it may be self-imposed pressure. And if the Leafs go out in 4 or 5, I think, you know, I still think now that he's won a round, he's going to get his extension, and probably Keefe is as well. But I do think that if they go out like a lamb,
I don't know if Keefe gets his extension if they go out like a lamb.
Well, he still has a year, Russ. They don't have
life. It doesn't matter.
I know, but I mean, what I'm saying is they don't have to give him an extension.
Right.
They can let him play out the last year.
Yeah, that's a nightmare in Toronto.
I know, but so what was going on with Dubas?
But that's the GM. If all of a sudden the coach is like that in Toronto, it will be an unbearable year for everybody.
That's why I think he'll get an extension. Maybe
I don't know. Again, okay. I can't. If they were to get swept here, I can't give him an extension. And I would tell him we're going in a different direction.
If Dubas gets an extension, I would bet big money that Keefe gets an extension as well.
I got to tell you, there's going to be a point, Mike, and this could be the point where Dubas has to separate himself from Sheldon Keefe, and it's going to happen at some point.
Maybe Russ, but all I'm saying is if Dubas is given the authority in the form of a new contract, I think he probably stays with Sheldon Keefe. Maybe that's not the right move, but I think it'll be what I do think is, and we're already doing a post-mortem and it's too early to do that, but I do think that
possibilities. That's
right. I do think that, you know, with a year left on his contract, scoring a career high 40 goals, you will start to hear the Nylander trade talk.
Sure.
And I think it'll be legitimate this time. I think it'll be considered because they can't let him walk in unrestricted free agency, and they can't probably spend what he'll expect on a new contract, which is 8.5, probably like a Philip Forsberg type deal. They can't afford that. So
I think there's, you know, a very good chance that
here's the crazy thing to me, and this is where the bar is so low for coaching in Toronto compared to other cities where it used to be the opposite.
Yeah.
You look at Sheldon Keefe's career achievements with this team, and let's say he doesn't get through this round, he would be fired in every other market, Kev. Every other market.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah.
And what is that? When you think about it, like Kevin, that's a really interesting point there.
Yeah, it is.
Because when you think about it, like what is it that the Toronto has gone almost so far in the being afraid to be reactionary way? You know what I mean by that? Like they are afraid to be reactionary because they're being criticized by every which way. So they're going to, but by being afraid to be reactionary, they really do lose sight sometimes.
I don't think they're afraid to be reactionary. I think first of all, they weren't afraid to be reactionary when they fired Mike Babcock. I just think this is trust and loyalty in a particular coach by a particular member of management. But I also think if he gets an extension, it's an admission and a reflection of a recognition that there's a problem with the core group of this team, which I've been saying for 4 years. And, you know, if they lose and one or two of these guys are complete no-shows when this team needs them to step up, then you know you know what's going on with this.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's step past this series.
Yeah, let's look at Dallas because
the Dallas Seattle game last night. Let's just discuss how crazy Pavelski is right now. Let's just realize what he's doing. Like, I remember we sat here and talked about the USA team in the next Olympics, and like we talked about Pavelski a little bit. Just because you'd have to throw his name in there, but it's 2 years away. We're like, there's no way in the world, that Pavelski would still be ready for this. Do you remember this discussion?
I still feel the same way, though. I mean,
you still feel the same way.
I mean, yeah.
We're still 2 years away, of course.
Right, we're still 2 years away. Like if you're saying,
no matter what.
Yeah, that doesn't change how hot he is. But I mean, he's been really impressive, and what I really like too is, how the team is rallying around him.
Yes.
There's been so much discussion. I mean, I know I saw the quotes from Tyler Seguin. It was really a good quote, underrated in my opinion.
Much better. It's gotten really good.
Yeah, he's and he was just talking about, there's just nothing Pavelski's not good at. He plays cards well. He's a scratch golfer.
He also has a great quote too, because Wyatt Johnson's living is 19 years old and living in his house. He's like, there's whatever they're feeding him over there, whatever they're feeding him.
Yeah, and he said he's great at air hockey. He's just good at everything. So, but yeah, I mean, just to put this into perspective, there's only been 8 players in NHL history who've had 5 goals over 2 games. 8 players.
8 players.
Yeah, and in the playoffs, obviously, and only 2. And so Pavelski and Nathan MacKinnon have done it in the first 2 games of a series. So I mean, this is really remarkable what he's doing.
Are any of those 8 players over 30?
No, he's by far the oldest.
When they did it, right? So like you're even looking at that's the other thing.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's just awesome about this, because hockey can be like, when guys wear helmets, the joking thing, we're old enough to remember before guys wore helmets. Maybe a lot of people out there aren't, but there was like a real characters of the players because you saw their heads. You knew who that was. That was Rick McLeish, down there for me. And then as a kid, that was obviously that's what Bobby Clark looks like without his helmet.
McTavish,
right? But with their helmets on, they sort of everybody skates and sort of plays. There's a very, very much a similarity to everybody. Sometimes, like you watch a team all the time. Of course, you're going to learn the idiosyncrasies. But when you just watch the game. But Pavelski is so different than everybody else. I mean, in that he is obviously not fast, but he's got this, and this deflection thing, which he has turned into this art form, which is always publicized, but now is like being publicized out the wazoo. Mm-hmm. They're showing. I love how they're trying to show deflections on the NHL Network and all this stuff. This is hilarious, or on TNT or whatever they were between periods. But Pavelski's thing is just it's incredible, and it's so interesting from another level. Like I told my wife the other night, we're watching it. I'm like, watch this guy because he's really good at deflections. Like you've never said anything like that before. That's a strange thing.
The interesting thing, Kev, is that in bringing Pavelski back, they didn't put him between Hintz and Robertson. They put him with Mason Marchment and Max Domi, and now Max Domi's got 6 assists. Max Domi is really playing well, but because he's playing with Pavelski, he's sort of playing off of that. And that now gives Dallas a 3-line offensive attack with Robertson and Hintz on one line, Seguin and Ben, Wyatt Johnston, and now this line. I mean, I think the return of Pavelski and them not putting him on that number 1 line has really made their offensive attack much more diverse.
Yeah,
I agree. And there's a go ahead, Russ.
I was just going to say, I think, I watched this one, and I do feel like they set the statement early. I also feel like the fact that Wyatt Johnston wasn't in the top 3 for the Calder was bad, and this is showing exactly why, because he had 24 goals this year. How could he not be in the top 3? Anyway.
That was tough, though, because Skinner had a good year. It was a tough vote. But I had Wyatt Johnson in mind.
Yes, so did I.
Owen Power was really good. It was just one of those ones. Like I bet we end up seeing it. I bet 2nd, 3rd, and 4th or maybe all 4 are off within points of each other.
It could be very close.
Yeah. One of the points I want to make about Pavelski is, he's one of his reasons for his success is kind of a lost art. Usually when we talk about goal scorers, we talk about skating or the shot.
Yeah.
And what Pavelski has, in addition to, the art of the deflection, is an ability to know where to be.
Yeah.
Like he is one of the best at looking at the fortress that is today's modern defense and looking for entrances into that fortress. And he slides into these seams, and he has no business being where he doesn't know where the puck's going to go, but he seems to, because it always ends up in his direction, and then boom, he's there. Or somebody takes a shot and he's in the right spot to deflect it or to jam home a rebound. And it's a real art to know. And it's almost Brett Hall like. Brett Hall knew how to slide into the seams in the defense as well.
Yeah, and having just such great hands in tight, just in general, on rebounds, and rebounds and everything. It reminds me of Brett Hall's a good comparison. I always thought John Tavares was really good at that too. I thought that was one of the things that I've always liked about his game. But this is it's really just fun to watch. Yeah,
I mean, for me to compare to Brett Hall, I mean, I'm only talking about one aspect of it. Not like he doesn't have a Brett Hall one-timer or a steal or anything like that. But, I mean, they're different kinds of goal scorers. But just in the ability to find the seams, that's the only basis.
Yeah. I mean, he's such a leader, too. And just the way that team rallies around him. But I would say that I'm not convinced, Kevin, that he's not still outside. I wouldn't count the guy out for an outside shot at that USA team, because I just think that the way people rally around him.
41. He'd be 41 years old.
But he's such a rallying cry and such an experienced guy and so respected that
but the problem is US has never had as many great young players that are
I know
right at the cusp. I mean, the Robertsons and the Hughes.
It's going to be insane. The team's going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, coach, that'd be great.
Like will Dylan Larkin make the team? I mean, that's how tight it's going to be.
It's crazy.
I mean,
I do agree with that.
You used to say that automatically your 1-2 centers would be Austin Matthews and Jack Eichel, but now Jack Hughes is in there, and Dylan Larkin is there.
Jack Hughes has moved ahead of those guys. Jack Hughes is the man. One other point about the Stars, and I thought it was made by Jake Ottinger. He was kind of talking about what happened, and he said, the greatness in this league in terms of teams is often decided with the ability to bounce back from a bad loss. Yeah. And he basically said we had a bad loss in game one, and he was talking about himself.
Yeah.
And they're the number 3 defensive team in the NHL, and they were down 4-1 after the first period in the opening game of the series. So what was wrong with that picture? And Ottinger said, look, we just passed that test, because that's how you measure success, is in the ability to play a horrible game like we did, and then, come back and suddenly look. And, they didn't really, how many quality chances to Seattle did they really give up? Very few.
They kind of dominated that game last night. They really, they put it together and you really did make it okay, they just didn't show up for game one, and they are better than Seattle. Yeah. It's one of those clear cases of just, they're going to, I mean, they could easily come out of the West. There's no question in my mind that Dallas could easily.
Yeah, they could. I'm about to win, but, lose power, so I'm going to switch computers here. So
I know where you got it.
Let me back in. So
okay, you got it. We will.
Now let's
because I'm going to have to leave in 8 minutes, Mike. So I want to go to Edmonton. Okay. Yes, because I am still on the same bandwagon that I've been on.
Please, will you stop?
I am not going to stop until I'm proven wrong. How many goals did Skinner give up in that game?
Well, how about his defense? How about his defense sucks? How about that?
I'm not saying his defense doesn't suck, but what I am going to say, wish I had Kevin to back me up, because but I'm not going to, I don't have him here right now, so I'm going to have to do this without him. But I'm telling you this, it's the way the defense played in that one game that Campbell was in there was a lot better than the way the defense plays without Campbell in there. And there's a Skinner in it because
that was a momentum changer.
No, but Skinner is a skitterish goalie. He has that skitterish.
Is Matt Campbell's not? Have you seen him play?
Yes, of course.
Oh my God, no! Please, I mean, first of all, they obviously, based on how many games they've started him, have a lot of confidence in Stuart Skinner. But I also think it's a recognition of a lack of confidence in Jack Campbell. And your report about them trading Jack Campbell in the offseason is reflective of that.
Well, no, I am not saying that Edmonton doesn't agree. I'm not. As I sit here, I'm not saying that Edmonton doesn't agree with you, Mike. I think the Oilers 100%. I think the Oilers 100% agree with you that Skinner is their guy, 100%. Right? I'm just not buying it. As being there, I don't think they get past Vegas with Skinner.
I don't think they get past Vegas, period.
I think Campbell could get them past Vegas, and I think just because the defense would play a more solid game, we'll see where it goes. I mean, it's like, listen, and that's why when I read about Campbell rumors, they're out there. Kevin, you talk about goalies that are available. There's one, Jack Campbell.
Yeah, but he didn't. He's not getting the love out there from the people. Then, and one of them is one of the guys looking for a goalie. So,
one of them is Buffalo, and they do like.
Well, but they don't want a goalie.
I heard.
They don't want a goalie with that much term. And
I don't think they would do that.
I think that's too much money. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if all of a sudden Kevin Cheveldayoff put Connor Hellebuck out there with a year left at $6.1 million, I think Kevin Adams would say, "Gimme." But 4 years at $5 million for a guy who had a sub 900 save percentage, and really, other than 2 months with Toronto, really hasn't proven that he's a solid number one goalie in this league.
But if your goalie is going to be on an entry level contract, your top goalie, in Buffalo, which is, it probably will be. If that's the case, then why not have a solid backup who you can bring in? I know it's only 2 years, but why not have a solid backup that you can bring in? They have plenty of money. Like Campbell as a backup.
They don't really have plenty of money. They've got a lot of great young players. They've got to. I mean, they're going to be suddenly in a Toronto position pretty quickly here.
And as soon as this summer, if they get what they want to extend Dahlin and they want to extend Owen Power, and you're extending Dahlin, you're probably spending. It could be 8 figures. It could be $10 million a year, and they probably won't get Power on anything more than a bridge deal. But even a bridge deal, he's probably going to make $3 or $4 million. So there goes your money.
Yeah. What did they give Cousins? When they
gave Cousins $7 million. They gave Thompson almost $8 million.
Yeah,
so they're not going to have a ton of money, but they are going to. To me, it's legitimate if you can pay your goalies a combination of $7 million for both of them. That's not terrible.
Well, I think that they would be willing to spend money on a goaltender while Levi is on his ELC, which is 2 more years. Right. Anything longer than that, when they're going to have to pay, anticipate that they're going to have to pay Levi, then it gets untenable. If it's somebody like, somebody said Mackenzie Blackwood in the chat, or Cam Talbot on a 1 or 2 year deal, or somebody like that, I don't think they have an issue. But if it's,
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is, I don't have any idea whether Buffalo likes Campbell. Maybe they love him, as X said. But the problem I have with it, I think regardless of how you feel about Campbell, it's still an uncertainty. And do you want to pay that amount of money for uncertainty? I think if you're going to have an uncertainty, you'd rather go in with a $2 million uncertainty. So that's I'm just looking at it logically, but maybe they love him. I don't know. So.
I don't debate you on that, Kevin, because here's the thing. Like, well, they do like him. Obviously, he's got there's a lot of USA hockey in Buffalo. A lot in the coaching and the general manager and in general, right? There's a lot of USA hockey going on there. And Campbell has a really good reputation with USA hockey, as you know. So they So the reality is that, if he comes in without the pressure of being like this crazy, and he's like almost the perfect, say go Blackwood, say we go like Levi and Blackwood, those are your 2 goalies. Then you really it's really 2 kind of unknowns. Like, I mean, Levi could be like, phenomenal, but if you have Campbell to fall back on, he could get you.
He's an unknown. He's an unknown.
Not an unknown.
I mean, I guess what it comes down to, like, if you're telling me that Adams and Granato are sold on him, then I think it's possible.
Yeah.
If they're saying, I like it, I think he's a good roll of the dice. I think that's different. Like, then you gotta sort of pay attention to what he's making. And if you have another guy that you also say, he's a good roll of the dice. Yeah. Then I think you're going to take the cheaper guy. Now, if Granato says, I love this kid, he's a first-class citizen, and Adams said, I think he's much better than he's ever been given credit for, well, then it's a different story. So it all really does come down to how they feel about him.
But I think Granato is the kind of coach that would like to have a goalie that he's at least familiar with.
But before you leave, because I just want to touch on this series, maybe I'm making a bigger deal of it, but when you have a guy, and you could say the same thing about Dallas and Pavelski in game one, when you have a guy like Draisaitl and the combo like Draisaitl and McDavid who score 4 times and you don't win, that's a cardinal sin. That is really, now I think that is a statement more on the pitiful defense that Edmonton played than on Stuart Skinner. And in game 2, if that happens again, Edmonton will, be down 2-0 going back to Rogers Arena or Rogers Center. I just think right now they have to tighten up defensively and they cannot depend on Draisaitl and McDavid just to carry the ball as they've done for year after year. When they play as a deeper team, they're better, but they're not playing that way. They're depending on McDavid and Draisaitl to carry them to victory.
They're also depending on Skinner, who doesn't have a track record either, and that could still prove costly too.
I mean, they're scoring enough goals to win.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is they're scoring up, but they're giving up a ton.
Yeah, they are scoring enough goals to win. That's for sure.
They're giving up a ton of goals.
Does it seem to anyone else that our Oilers coach, it seems like he's also feeding into this 2-line deal by the way he plays these guys. Like he's not a guy saying, I love to roll 4 lines. He's not that guy.
No, and I think he should adjust to the depth that they have. I mean, honestly, Eck, if they're having a contest of who looks more deer in the headlights, Sheldon Keefe or Jay Woodcroft, I'd say Woodcroft. Sometimes I look at him and I'm like, I don't have any.
I agree. I
agree with that.
He does have that, but I don't know who I would say is more of a deer in headlights. But they both have that deer in headlights look to them.
Yes. By the way, save me 5 minutes. I got something I want to talk about at the end of the show.
Okay. I really have to go, guys. I'm sorry.
Okay. We'll continue because we still have to touch up on Carolina, New Jersey.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for everything. We'll see you guys on Monday.
Yeah.
All right.
There is a report by Frank Cervelli that at least several Calgary players rescinded their trade request when Sutter got fired.
No, I mean the way
I believe that report.
Yeah, me too. I said it was Sutter got fired by exit interviews.
Yes, especially Huberdeau apparently. But the way it was, Don Maloney made it sound. He said he talked to players, he talked to the coaching staff, he talked to the agents of players, and then decided they had to go someplace. Yeah, because there was almost a mass mutiny in Calgary, essentially, of the way Sutter was doing things. Now, Carolina, New Jersey, game 2, Kev, midway through the second period, New Jersey had 1 shot on goal. Lindy pulls Schmid after giving up 3 goals on 11 shots. I think that's more of a reflection of them having to sort of change the momentum and not what Schmid was doing.
Yeah.
So, game 2, I would assume Schmid's going back in.
Yeah, I would say so too. I mean, seems like the net is his, but I agree with you. It was just what you do to kind of change the momentum a little bit. But, that just wasn't a good game for the Devils. And, we'll come back in 2 and we'll see what happens.
That was a game where still Carolina had trouble putting them away, even though they were up. Even at 3-1, you still felt like the Devils might get back in it. So I'm with Kevin. I don't think they're completely worried about this, and I think they probably will operate similarly. Now, it could make a lineup change and may not hurt them.
Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah. I mean, the Devils' strength is their offense, and the Carolina's strength is their defensive core. And in that particular game, the defensive core was very good, and the Devils' offense was not. So, that's going to happen, and maybe next game it'll be reversed. But, the series really starts in game 2 for me. So we'll see what happens. If Carolina comes out and wins again, then now we're in a hole. But even that, it's nothing the Devils haven't already seen in this playoffs, even if they lose this game. So next game. So, I think this series has reminded everyone that, there's a reason why we play 7 games. So,
yeah, the only thing is somebody who's being impacted by this series, or I think it is just Jesper Bratt. He's only got 4 points. He only has 1 goal. Like, if he wants to make a big contract next year, he needs to get it online for them, because otherwise I think they are going to nitpick him on his playoff performance, because it hasn't been great.
No.
Kev, go ahead with what you wanted to talk about.
Well, I wanted to talk about. I wrote about obituaries in the NHL are kind of interesting in my business at Detroit Hockey Now, where I write. They don't do particularly well. People, you would think they would want to read about some of the heroes they saw play, but Bob and I have always lamented that in terms of producing readership, it's not what you think. But we continue to do them because we think that's newsworthy and everybody should give their proper send off. So we always write them. But every once in a while, you get a sense of a player's popularity by you write an obit and it takes off. And that happened yesterday. For me, I wrote about Peter Klima.
Mm-hmm.
And, Peter Klima was not a great player. But he was an entertaining player. He was a colorful player.
He was quirky. I remember him as being quirky.
Well, yeah. I mean, he had an odd helmet.
Yep.
Yes.
He had candy cane style tape on his stick.
Right.
He was a bad boy. He got himself in trouble. He had a mullet. For a while he had flowing hair.
I can't blame the mullet on him. That was a lot of guys.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of guys. He was always in trouble in the doghouse with the coach because defense was not who he was. There's a great story about Peter Klima. He ended the longest game in Stanley Cup final history at 15 plus minutes into the third period. He had been glued to the bench for the entire overtime. He hadn't played much at all. He was the freshest person in the entire arena.
Yeah, John Muckler benched him for like the third and the first two periods of over. Were you at that game, Kev?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Was that the game that the power went out?
Yes, it was 26 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that very vividly.
But he was the freshest guy in, and Muckler called him, and he went out and he scored the game-winning goal of Game 1, and of course he ended up winning a Stanley Cup. But I also noted that he played for 5 teams, and every team, even though he was a bit of a bad boy, put out a statement of condolences to the family. Yeah. And I just kind of wanted to bring that up because it just shows like the impact because many people had something to say about Peter Klima.
Yeah.
He was, like I said, he was not an exceptional player. He was a 30-goal scorer, and he was a dynamic player. He was dangerous when he was on the ice. But he was dangerous at both ends. It was
right. It was because I remember him very vividly because Detroit in the Norris division playing Toronto all the time, so I saw him all the time, and that was at the point where European players coming over and defecting before the wall fell. I remember Jeff Merrick was talking about like Vaclav Nedemansky and a couple other players played for Toronto in the WHA, and the Stastnys came over with Quebec, but it was always Canadian teams. They had an easier time getting these players to come over, and the countries that they played for were less upset if they came to Canada. When it came to the U.S. and with the Soviets and all the Soviet bloc countries, it was more difficult to get those players over. And Klima was one of the first, and
he was the first actually.
Yeah, and very skillful, but yeah, he was definitely a liability in his own end. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean the defection story. It was like an Ian Fleming James Bond book.
Right.
They first met him in Vancouver and got a contract signed, and then they made a contact with him. The national team was going to Germany, and they set it up to meet him in the woods outside of Nussbaum, Germany. And so they show up, and they got no idea. Like, they don't know whether the Czechs have figured this out. Are they, is there going to be a security force of Czech, secret police there meeting them? It's a little nerve-wracking, to say the least. And then out walks Peter Klima from the woods, and then he wants to renegotiate his contract. It's just a minor thing, but they had to renegotiate his contract there for a little minor deal. He said, okay, I'll be right back, which they didn't like to hear. but he went in somewhere and they came back and he had brought some memento. He had no clothes, no passport because you got to turn over your passport.
Wow.
And but he had some mementos that he wanted to keep. So he had an armful of mementos with no clothes and no passport. And then he said, "Oh, by the way, I need one other thing. I need to get my girlfriend out of the Czechoslovakia as well." So then they had to start working on that. But it took him a month, and to get him back to the United States. So they were over in Germany a long time, and he was growing impatient and frustrated, and then he finally came over. But it takes a lot of courage to walk away from everything.
Yeah. Some of those stories, I mean, Chris in the chat is talking about McGillney. I mean, I remember hearing about the McGillney story, Jerry Meehan and Don Luce and Bob Swados, Russ, who was part of the. I think they went over to I think it was Finland, and they got him. It was sort of like a spy novel type of situation. And if I remember correctly, didn't Pavel Bure defect at the World Juniors, Russ? Wasn't it something like that?
Yeah.
I know I have an Upper Deck story where they got to him before that, and they crossed. I know the person who actually crossed the border with a duffel bag full of cash so they could sign Pavel Bure to a card contract.
Yeah. Well, Fedorov defected at the Goodwill games in Seattle.
Yes.
He walked away from his team, but another part of that story was that the Red Wings wanted to get him earlier, and Klima said, "No, I got to complete my military service because they shoot you if you don't do your military service." So, wow.
I'm gonna have to replay the Bob Swados interview though, because it really is like a chilling kind of thing. Like, he went into so much detail and about how it all went down, and he was worried. Like, here he is. He's like, a polished American lawyer, businessman, high-ranking guy for the Sabres, and he was worried. Like, he was worried about how things would go. It wasn't just like, we all just laugh about it now. It's like, no, it was tense.
Yeah, no, all that stuff was tense, and I mean, these. It's hard to even imagine now. That not having the freedom to go, where you wanted to go. So I remember it was a big deal in Rendezvous. When Larionov spoke English, so we could talk to him, and there were rumors that there were Russians were going to be allowed out, and would these guys get out? And it was. I remember there must have been 50 reporters around Larionov trying to get him to talk, and you could see the KBG guy over his left shoulder, and it was just it was a difficult situation. But anyway, I just wanted to speak to the popularity of Peter Klima. You don't sometimes understand and appreciate the popularity of some players, but Peter Klima was one of those guys that, everybody has a kind of a memory of him for whatever reason, because he was colorful, because he was entertaining, because he was a bad boy, because he, had an odd looking helmet, because he could skate, and who knows why, but he somehow connected with the fan base in 5 different teams.
I tell people, still go out there and try and see the movie Red Army by Gabe Polsky. It really is incredible what these players had to go through over there. And it's not just Russia. It's other countries too. Russia just took it to a new level. But there were things that were detailed in that movie that, even though things were covered in the papers and you would read about it, it was still worse than you could imagine. And I imagine he went through a lot of that too.
Yeah. So the schedule is Devils Hurricanes tonight. Only one game on Saturday, which is very unusual. Oilers Vegas at 7:00, and then 3 games on Sunday. Hurricanes Devils game 3, Leafs Panthers game 3, and Seattle and Dallas game 3. So light schedule those next 2 nights. Probably, like I said, because of building availability. And there's also a rumor, Kev, that Vinny Viola, the owner of the Florida Panthers, because he owns the favorite in the Kentucky Derby tomorrow, didn't want the game on Saturday so he could do the Kentucky Derby in Louisville.
Well, it's a losing ratings battle if you try and go up against the Derby. It is.
Well, the game would have been at 7:00. So, but I'm saying he wanted to be in Louisville to watch his horse, I think it's Forte, run. and then be able to go and watch his team play. They'd maybe use the excuse of the Miami Heat playing against the Knicks as the reason why, but there was some talk about him like sort of putting his finger on the scale in terms of getting them to play Game 3. Stranger things have happened. You never know.
It's good to be the king.
I do want to mention this though. 4 horses died leading up to this Kentucky Derby, and they already started to take some action. It's no joke. I mean, that's one thing that I really wish was better is how they take care of these horses. You could say, hey, you don't have to worry about the big rich ones and the $1 million ones. Well, that may be true to a point, but we're starting to learn that maybe that's not the truth.
And won the show because on on Monday the NHL draft lottery happens, the 8th. So we'll do this and we'll do it again on Monday before the actual lottery. So we press the button and the Anaheim Ducks win the lottery, Russ, and
Philly gets second. Philly got Fantilli in that one.
And Buffalo gets third, comes up 10 spots and wins third place, which if they got Leo Carlson or Fantilli or
well, here's the thing now. I mean, if you're going to go by Bob McKenzie, who takes really like a temperature of all the different scouts out there and kind of puts together his numbers, he's got Will Smith at third. I love Will Smith. I would never take him third. I still would take Carlson every day of the week. But if there's a team,
he's going. Carlson's going as third.
Yeah,
but
if there's a team that actually would take Will Smith third, I'd be shocked.
Talk about an embarrassment of riches: Zegras, McTavish, and Bedard.
Yeah, well,
Drysdale coming off an injury.
I think Zegras ended up on the wing.
Yeah, he would. Oh, there's no question.
Yeah, and you know what? That may be better for him anyway.
It might be better for him.
Yeah, because he, I think he's struggling with all the two-way effectiveness that you need to be a elite level center. So
this could be a line that all of a sudden we love, because I just don't feel like, and this will just be my last little bit, I still don't feel like there are enough line nicknames or great lines left in this league that we could really latch on to. Even in these playoffs, there's a couple, but it's not like it used to be, not like the old days. I think that would sort of bring it back to that.
Yeah, no, I agree, but Anaheim has only a 25% chance of winning this. So
right. They did that. You know what? In 2019, they decided to take away some of the percentage points from the worst teams and give them to the other teams that didn't make the playoffs. And I still don't understand that. I don't. I feel like, look, I said it the other day on Locked On Flyers, Kev, I'll get your opinion. If it were me, I would just have the worst 5 teams draw twice to see who's getting first and second, and then let everything else fall where it may. But I really feel like the worst teams should really have that much better chance.
I mean, that's the way it was before, as you recall, the 5 teams. I really didn't like that very well. Like, I think if you miss the playoffs, you ought to have some shot, but it should be weighted. But I think the losing teams need a higher percentage than they're getting.
They definitely do. There's no question about that.
That was pre. I think 2009 was the last time, because that was the Tavares, the top 5, and then I think they changed it at that point. So anyway, we'll see what happens on Monday. It'll definitely change the fortunes of one particular team. For the departed Eklund, for Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.